Adhuva Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunjabihari Janamalaba Gopi Janamalaba Iri Vadanavi Sudanandana Rajachanaranjanta Sudanandana Rajachanaranjana Jira Panachane Tera Manachane Ayarabu Maruba Punjabihari Ayarabu Janabalaba Giri Vadanavi Janabalaba Giri Vadanavi Jai, Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa, Paravidikacharya, also Tata, Satashi, Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya, Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai, ISKCON, Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai, Anantakoti, Vaishnava, Vrinda, Ki Jai, Namacharya, Srila Haridas Thakur, Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Garadha Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Gajaya Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Shaima Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Kijay Vrindavanam ki jai, Mathuranam ki jai, Jagannathaswami ki jai, Munamai ki jai, Srimati Lasidevi ki jai, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimad Bhaktivedanta Samaniti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pacharni Nivishesha Shinyavadi Paschachate Shatarni. So, what verse should we read from? Any requests?
Canto 8, Chapter 3.
Canto 8, Chapter 3. Okay. Okay, let's go there. All right. Canto 8, Chapter 3. That's what you've been reading from, or?
Yeah, I was reading a while back.
Gajendra's Prayers of Surrender. Which verse?
Whichever.
Whichever. Okay, let's start with number 1. Thank you. Haribo. Okay, good to see everybody. Okay, so 831. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So none of you have it? No? You can't repeat? 8. Yes, everybody should have it on their devices. 831.
831.
Shri Badarayane Ruvacha.
Shri Badarayane Ruvacha.
You can remember with it.
Evam.
Oh, you know it.
Yeah, that's.
He knows it by heart. Evam
Evam.
Vyavasito
Yavasito.
Abudya
Udya.
Samadhaya
Samadhaya.
Mano
Mano.
Riddhi
Hrdi.
Jajapa
Japa.
Paramam
Paramam.
Japyang
Yapyam.
Prag
Prag.
Janmade
Janmane.
Anushikshatam.
Anushikshitam.
It's the first verse in the 3rd chapter of the 8th canto. Shri Badarayane Ruvacha.
Badarayane Ruvacha.
Evam Vyavasito Buddhya
Evam Vyavasito Buddhya.
Samadhoya Manohriti
Samadhaya Manohrdi.
Jajapa Paramhang Japyang
Jajapa Paramam Japyam.
Pragjanman Anushikshitam.
Pragjanmanyanushikshitam.
Shri Badarayane Ruvacha.
Shri Badarayane Ruvacha.
Evam Vyavasito Buddhya
Evam Vyavasito Buddhya.
Samadhaya Manohriti
Samadhaya Manohrdi.
Japa Paramhang Japyam
Jajapa Paramam Japyam.
Pragjanma Anukshikshitam.
Pragjanmanyanushikshitam.
Shri Badarayane Ruvacha.
Shri Badarayane Ruvacha.
Evam Vyavasito Buddhya
Evam Vyavasito Buddhya.
Samadhaya Manohriti
Samadhaya Manohrdi.
Japa Paramhang Japyam
Jajapa Paramam Japyam.
Pragjanman Yanukshikshitam.
Pragjanmanyanushikshitam.
Okay. Anyone else?
Shri Bhadrayane Vacha
Badarayane Ruvacha
Evam Vyavasito Buddhya
Evam
Vyavasito
Vyavasito
Buddhya
Buddhya.
Samadhya Manohirhidi
Samadhaya
no hridi.
Jajapya param japyam
Japa param japyam
prajanmane anusikshitam
Prajanmanyanushikshtam.
Anyone else? He knows it by heart.
Rayani
Vacha.
Evam vyavashito buddhaya
Evam vyavasito buddhya
Samadhaya manodidi
Samadhaya manodidi
Jajapa paramam japyam
Japa param japyam
Pragjanmani anukshishtam
Prajanmanyanushikshtam.
Shivadraya nirvacha
Shivadrayanirvacha
Evam vyavasito buddhya
Evam vyavasito buddhya
Samadhaya manodidi
Samadhaya manodidi
Japa paramam japyam
Japa param
Japyam.
Pragjanmani anukshitam
Prajanmanyanushikshtam.
What about the sage, great sage?
He said,
He knows it by heart.
Shivadrayanirvacha
Shivadrayane Vacha.
Evam vyavasito buddhya
Shivam Buddhya.
Samadhaya manohridi
Hridi.
Jajapa paramam japyam
Japyam.
Pragjanmanyanushikshtam.
Shoot. Do you know the whole chapter by heart? You do?
I did a while back. I don't know.
The whole chapter? Oh my God. Oh my God. Anyway, he should be a preacher.
he gives a good class.
Yeah, he should be a preacher. Take sannyas, you know. Should be trained as a sannyas. Yeah. What's he getting involved in the material world for?
Bharat Prabhu wanted him to be engineer.
I didn't say that, no.
Let him go to the university, get his degree,
Yeah,
and,
that's what. Yeah.
and he can be a preacher.
Yeah.
Like our murderer. But he doesn't have to get married. So, that's up to him. Okay. Shri Badarayani Vacha. Shri Shukadeva Goswami said,
Sri Shukadeva Goswami said,
Evam,
Evam
thus,
thus
Vyavasita,
Vyavasita
fixed,
fixed
Buddhya,
Buddhya
by intelligence,
by intelligence
Samadhaya,
Samadhaya
for in concentration,
For concentration.
Mana,
Mana
the mind,
the mind
Hridi,
Hridi
in consciousness or in the heart,
in consciousness or in the heart
Jajapa,
Japa
he chanted,
he chanted
Paramam,
Paramam
a supreme,
a supreme
Japyam,
Japyam
mantra he had learned from great devotees.
Mantra
Prakjanmane,
Janmani
in his previous birth,
in his previous birth
Anusikshitam,
Anushikshtam
practiced.
practiced.
Translation. Sri Shukadeva Goswami continued thereafter. The king of the elephants, Gajendra, fixed his mind in his heart with perfect intelligence and chanted a mantra which he had learned in his previous birth as Indradunya, and which he remembered by the grace of Krishna. So, purport by his divine grace. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Such remembrance is described in Bhagavad Gita 6:43-44. Tatra tang buddhisang yogam labate parva dehikam yatate chatato bhuya sang siddha kurunandana purvabhyasena tenaiva riyate yavaso vi saha. In these verses, it is assured that even if a person engaged in devotional service falls down, he is not degraded, but is placed in a position in which he will, in due course of time, remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As explained later, Gajendra was formerly King Indradunya, or somehow or other in his next life he became king of the elephants. Now Gajendra was in danger, and although he was in a body other than that of a human being, he remembered the stotra he had chanted in his previous life. Yatate chato bhuya samsirao kurunandana. To enable one to achieve perfection, Krishna gives one the chance to remember him again. This is proved here. For although the king of the elephants, Gajendra, was put in danger, this was a chance for him to remember his previous devotional activities, so that he could immediately be rescued by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is imperative, therefore, that all devotees in Krishna consciousness practice chanting some mantra. Certainly one should chant what? The Hare Krishna mantra, which is the Maha mantra, or great mantra, and also one should practice chanting Chintamani Prakara Sadmasu or the Nrsimha Stotra Ito Nrsimha Parato Nrsimha Yato Yato Yami Tato Nrsimha. Every devotee should practice in order to chant some mantra perfectly, so that even though he may be imperfect in spiritual consciousness in this life, in his next life he will not forget Krishna consciousness, even if he becomes an animal. Of course, the devotee should try to perfect his Krishna consciousness in this life, for simply by understanding Krishna and his instructions, after giving up this body, one can return home back to Godhead. Even if there is some fall down, practice of Krishna consciousness never goes in vain. For example, Jamil in his boyhood practiced chanting the name of Narayan under the direction of his father, but later in his youth he fell down and became a drunkard, woman hunter, rogue, and thief. Nonetheless, because of chanting the name of Narayan for the purpose of calling his son, whom he had named Narayan, he became advanced even though he was involved in sinful activities. Therefore, we should not forget the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra under any circumstances. It will help us in the greatest danger, as we find in the life of Gajendra. And just short commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. In the third chapter, the Lord, satisfied with Gajendra's prayers, lifts him from the water, killing the crocodile with his chakra, and in that way delivers both of them. Vyavasita means he decided, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So again, the verse. Shri Badarayan Hiruvacha Evam Vivasito Buddhya Samadhaya Manoridi Tajapa Paramang Japyang Pragjanman Yanu Shikshitam Somagana Timiranda Shah Ganansana Shlagaya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shivareka Maha. So this is similar to what we were talking about yesterday, isn't it? We're talking about samskaras, right? And we were also talking about how Krishna puts his devotees in danger, puts people in danger. And so it's actually pretty much the same topic. So again, what is a samskara? You remember what I talked about yesterday? Impression. And the word means samskara, means perfect activity, basically, or impression. So whatever we do in this life, we get impressions, not on the gross body. I mean, you can impress the gross body. That's not what I'm talking about. But we have this linga sharira. That means a subtle body. Sometimes in the West they call that the astral body. Ever heard of that before? Astral body, subtle body, whatever. And just like we have this gross body, which is pancha mahabhuta. You know what that is? Earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then the subtle body is mind, intelligence. It's not the mind, obviously. It's the brain. There's also the gross body. But anyway, so mind, intelligence, and false ego. So this subtle body we take from one lifetime to another. It's basically the body of our consciousness. And it has all these different impressions from one lifetime to another. That's why when we chant Hare Krishna, we're trying to get rid of the impressions. Not the Krishna conscious impressions, but we're trying to get rid of the bad impressions. That's why we have Lord Chaitanya Shikshashtika, Cheto Darbana Marjanam. So what is it? What is the cleansing that's going on? It's cleansing the past impressions, right? That's what the cleansing is. Because what are these impressions in this world? You know, oh my God. I should yell at them, but I'm not going to do that. Let me put it on. There's a problem. So we have so many remembrances, and therefore, when we're dreaming at night, you know, sometimes we dream like what? We're a bird flying in the air. And that means maybe in the last life, I was a pigeon. Right? Yeah, it's Pigeon Maharaj. But in the last life, like a cockroach, you know. And somehow or other, I was a cockroach in the devotee's family, you know. Possible, isn't it? And then I just snuck up in the middle of the night and ate some prasadam. It happens. I mean, just like Prabhupada tells the example of that rat that was on the altar. You know the story? And the flame went out, and he kept the flame going, and he died, and he went back to God. Anyway. So, you know, you get impressions in any lifetime. It's not only human beings get impressions in the subtle body, but the animals also can get impressions in the subtle body. So our whole business is to get rid of all those mundane impressions by the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And so, and to create good impressions, that's why we have samskaras. Like every day, I mean technically, every day we're doing a samskara when we chant Hare Krishna. Although it's not a formal one. Like you have in the Vedic system, there's so many different samskaras. There's Garbhadana samskara, right? And before that you got Vivaha, hopefully. Hopefully before you do Garbhadana samskara you get married. But anyway, you have, and you know, that's why Prabhupada, don't start the computer. So that's why Prabhupada talked about having devotees. It's very interesting, even though the technical Vedic Garbhadana Sanskara is much more complex than what Prabhupada gave the devotees. But Prabhupada actually simply said, chant 50 rounds. Interesting, isn't it? Although technically, if you get into the details in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, you'll find so many details, you know, about Garbhadana Sanskara. You're supposed to eat this, wake up at this time in the morning. Everything gets very complex. So, but that's it. You chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And then your consciousness is good. And not only do you have this good samskara, but at the time of conception, you're going to attract some good soul. And if you have bad consciousness, bad samskara, you're going to attract a bad soul. Just like the story of Diti and Kashyapa. You had Kashyapa and Diti, of course, they're in the heavenly planets. And Diti became agitated with lust. And she approached her husband, Kashyapa, and she said, you know, anyway, we should have this relationship. And he said, no, it's not auspicious. You know, because Lord Shiva is traveling around right now with all of his nice little associates, bhutas, pisachas, isn't it? Witches, goblins, and everything like that. And, you know, if you want to have a kid, you're going to have a goblin or a witch or something like that as a kid. Right? That's in the Bhagavatam. And then she said no, and she grabbed his dhoti. And he just, like, lost his intelligence. Avritam Gyanametena Gyaninan Chishvarina Kamarupena. Isn't it? Kontiya Dushparena Lena Cha. It's actually interesting. If one has the wrong association, even though it's the one's a wrong, a elevated soul like Kashyapa. Kashyapa is not just an ordinary American. He's actually a greatly super intelligent sage. You know, and so, but he lost his intelligence by that bad association, isn't it? Karnam gunasangasha sarasad janma jonishu. Anyway, and he lost his intelligence, and then had a kid, and two kids actually, a nice Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha as the children. So anyway, so one has to be very careful about association. That was the main point I'm making about association with these samskaras, these impressions, because they can deviate one from Krishna consciousness immediately, or they become implanted in the brain. In the mind, so that one actually becomes contaminated and forgets about their Krishna consciousness, or has to struggle with so many memories that impede one's progress in Krishna consciousness, right? Just like I know, when I was young, I didn't have such a good samskaras when I was a young kid. And so many memories come up of different mundane songs and television shows and everything like that. So it's important that we protect the children from these different impressions on the subtle body and give them good impressions. That's a very important point. So anyway, getting back to the point, so these impressions come with us from one lifetime to another, because the subtle body goes with us from one lifetime to another. And Krishna in the Gita describes it just like the air carrying aromas from one place to another. So you take the same consciousness from one lifetime to another. And of course that's beneficial if you happen to be a devotee in the past like Gajendra was, because then somehow or other you'll be attracted to Krishna consciousness. Actually, Krishna in the Gita, he talks about when Arjuna asks him the question in the 6th chapter of the Gita, what happens if someone deviates from Krishna consciousness, and is he finished? He hasn't made the spiritual world, and he hasn't enjoyed the material world. Everything's finished. Sometimes people say that if you don't become completely Krishna conscious, they say, then you've given up your opportunity to enjoy in this lifetime. And you're not going back to Godhead anyway. So Krishna answers, he says, one who does good in this world is never overcome by evil. In other words, he describes that two types of things happen if one is Krishna conscious in this life, as far as the next life is concerned. One thing is if one is not so advanced in Krishna consciousness, he takes birth in the heavenly planets. That's the first point. And then his next life, and he enjoys like anything, in Indraloka with all the apsaras, anyway, like Urvasi and everything. And then after that, he takes birth in a rich family, and then he gets the opportunity to be attracted to Krishna consciousness. And if one is very advanced in Krishna consciousness, then he takes birth in a devotee family, like both of you. That means you're very advanced.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't know what you're dealing with.
I can't sleep in it.
No. You came to Krishna consciousness because you weren't so advanced. You came because of my mercy. She came. Isn't it? She's been a devotee her whole life. He's been a devotee. So that indicates that in the last life, they were very advanced yogis in the past. Like they're called Vaikuntha children. It means you should pay obeisances to them. Yeah, I mean, it's a fact. I mean, these children, Prabhupada very much stressed the care of the children because that indicates just the fact that they're born in the movement or born in devotee families or exposed to Krishna consciousness means in the last life they were greatly advanced souls. More advanced than the rest of us who came to Krishna consciousness. I mean, my own experience is that when I first came to a temple, I recognized it. So that, in other words, there was past life experience in Krishna consciousness, but I wasn't born in a devotee family. That's the difference. But, I remember the first time I came in and I attended Tulsi worship, and I didn't understand what was going on. But I had some recognition, it's called deja vu, that, hey, I've been doing this before. And the first time I saw Prabhupada, I recognized him. Oh, he's my spiritual master. I didn't need to be introduced. So, I mean, that's all past life. But it's much more fortunate when one is born in a devotee family. So the children should be treated like great jewels.
Diamonds.
That's true. Diamonds are jewels. And given the opportunity to grow naturally, they don't have to be forced to be Krishna conscious. You have to chant. They want to chant their rounds. Anyway, that's the point. I mean, it's really important point to understand because they already have the samskaras from the past life. And then in a very special case, you see children born in Acharya families, like Prabhupada. And they're worshiping deities from their very birth, like Prabhupada was worshiping the Radha Govinda deities. That's a very special case. Or Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, not only was he born in a devotee family, but his father prayed for a ray of Vishnu. I don't think you prayed for a ray of Vishnu. Before she was born. But his father prayed for a ray of Vishnu, and not only that, he appeared where? Did anyone know where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj appeared?
In front of the Puri, like the Rath
In Jagannath Puri. Right on the main road. And not only that, when the cart stopped in front of their house, the cart wouldn't move until he was brought out and it was time for his grain ceremony. And they brought him out, and the garland from the deities fell on him. I mean, that's a special case. I mean, your children not like that. It's not you took a knot out and the garland from Lord Jagannath fell on him, and you went to the Rath Yatra and the cart wouldn't move. These are very special cases. And Prabhupada's father, Gurmohan Dev, prayed for what? A great devotee of Radharani. So you see in the Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's father prayed for a right-hand man of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So these are very special cases. So in those cases, those are called Nishasiddha devotees. It's not that they, just continuing their Krishna consciousness and then they're perfecting it. They're already perfect. They're avatars. Shaktavesh avatars. Shaktavesh means, basically empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And avatar means to descend, to cross down. So they're Shaktavesh. This is a very special case. So you see all these different varieties of people who join the Krishna conscious movement. You find people like myself who were born in rich families. Obviously, if you refer to the Bhagavad Gita, that means previously I was in the heavenly planets and I got tired of the damn thing. Tired of the dancing girls. That's why I don't like to see dancing girls nowadays. I'm not that attracted to Bart, not you. what do they say? Seen it, done it, been there. So, it's obvious, you refer to Bhagavad Gita, born in a rich family, had a lot of time, was dissatisfied with the material world, and ultimately met Prabhupada again. That's it, finished. Now I'm going to be a sannyasi. Hopefully next life I'll be born in a devotee family. I pray. Or if I think of my pet dog or cat, then like Bart Maharaj, I'll be born as a cat or a dog. Krishna conscious cat and dog, like Bart Maharaj. You see, he didn't forget either. He was born as a deer. And he remembered, so hopefully, just like sometimes in the morning in Nukalaka, they're chanting japa and there's deer, and I think how cute. And sometimes I'm chanting, I chant really early in the morning like here. Sometimes I see bunny rabbits, bunny rabbits. And I think, oh, this is really cute, and I try to go up to them and pet them, but they run away. Hop away, they don't run away. And so, let's say if I die in such a circumstance, there'll be a little bunny rabbit. But at least I'll remember. At least I'll remember, oh my God, what did I do? So, anyway, so the point is, several points is that we have varieties of different devotees in the movement who come from different backgrounds. We have some who are just, like the children here, who are just appearing because they're perfecting their Krishna consciousness from last lifetime. And we have others like me, come from the heavenly planets. And we have others who are just coming to Krishna consciousness for the first time by Prabhupada's mercy. And it's interesting that you look at all this and you think, why doesn't everybody go back to God in one lifetime? But actually Krishna says, Bahunam Janmanamante Jnanamam Prapajate Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. That it takes many lifetimes, generally. I mean, obviously you could go back to home, back to God in one lifetime. That can happen. However, the general process is Bahunam Janmanamante, after many births. So you may become discouraged when you hear that, right? It sounds very discouraging. Many births, I don't want to take another birth. But actually, if one thinks like Bhaktivinoda Thakur and other acharyas talk about that, or Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Mama Janmani Svare Bhavatad Bhakti Haituki Twaye, that, as long as I can serve Krishna, it's all right to take another birth. Or Bhaktivinoda Thakur even goes to the extent, Kita Janma Hoy Yatatu Das, that I'm willing to be born even as what? An insect, bug, in the house of your devotee, as long as I have association with devotees. And so in other words, it's not something that you should get discouraged with. You should think it's so nice now serving Krishna. And so I get to serve in the next life. And so basically one should want to serve Krishna life after life. Rather than thinking, let me get out of the material world, go back to Godhead, one should be thinking, let me serve you and please you, whether you want me to stay in the material world or whether you want me to go back to Godhead. A devotee doesn't aspire, actually a pure devotee doesn't aspire for any type of even Vaishnava liberation. Isn't it? Like Sarupya, Samishta, Sarsti, Salokya. The different types of Vaishnava liberation. Living, having the same opulences as the Lord, living on the planet of the Lord, having the same type of bodily form as the Lord, associating with the Lord. A devotee simply wants Mama Janmani Svare Bhavatat Bhakti Ahaituki Twaye. And so that should be our aspiration, and we should be practical and understand that going back to Godhead is not a cheap thing. It takes, what is it? Anyabi lashata shunyam gyanakarma navritam anukuyena krishnanushilanam bhaktirutamam. It takes absolute devotion to Krishna without any other desire, isn't it? Can anyone in this room say that they have absolutely no desire other than to please Krishna. Can you say that? You could say it, but you know, it's a lie. So, you know, I think it's also important to be honest, isn't it? That, devotees should be honest. And even if you don't have any other desire, you're going to be humble and say that you do have a desire. Right? Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur prays that, try to remember the Bengali for this prayer, that, Gopinath, Namena Vedana Shuno, Vishaya Durjana. I have no good qualities. I'm Vishaya. I'm a sense gratifier. Shuno. I have no good qualities. Vishaya Durjana. I'm a bad person. And so, that's the devotee's humility. So anyway, even Prabhupada, out of his humility, he prayed. What did he pray? I have no hope for direct service in the coming crores of births. Did you ever hear that prayer? Even Prabhupada prayed like that. I have no hope. That was in his poem, Wakin Dharma. I have no hope for direct service. So there has to be some humility. And the pure devotees are humble like that. And those of us who are not humble, we should be truthful. And be ready to serve Krishna life after life. And the assurance Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter is that we will get the opportunity to serve Krishna next life. But of course, we shouldn't take advantage of it and say, therefore, I can do any damn thing because I get the opportunity to serve Krishna, because we may end up like Bharat Maharaj. Like Prabhupada, even in his purport, talks about even if a devotee takes birth as an animal, Prabhupada said, even if he becomes an animal, so that's shocking, isn't it? Because generally you hear, well, if you come to Krishna consciousness, you're not going to be an animal in that life. But Prabhupada here says, even if he becomes an animal. So therefore, according to this particular purport, we should all practice chanting at least the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and create good impressions, Krishna conscious impressions. So, any questions or comments? Ananta?
I had a question about, you were mentioning in the 6th chapter where Krishna says that some advanced yogi may go to the heavenly planets.
And then take birth in a rich family next life.
And then also take birth in a transcendent, like a devotee family.
Well, someone who's very advanced,
right.
He takes birth in a family of transcendentalists. Krishna says in the Gita, such a birth is very rare.
Right. So there's basically like two paths, right? Depending on your advancement, you would either come down into a rich family. If you have more pious credits.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not pious credits.
I guess so.
Devotional
service,
credits.
Yeah.
Then you take birth in a devotee family. There's actually, those are the two general paths, but, if you really think of an animal, you can become an animal in the next life, like Bharat Maharaj. That's an exceptional case. So what's the question?
Well, my question was then, which of the two, I guess it's...
Is better?
Well, no, not better. As in like we have Yam Yam Vapi Smaran Bhavam, which is like whatever you remember at the time of death is what you become, versus whatever your karma is, and so is it like a combination?
It's not karma, anyway. The devotee doesn't have karma.
Right, so like, I guess your desire and what you're thinking of at the time of death.
Yeah, it's your desire, your level of spiritual advancement. It's based on your consciousness. The devotee doesn't have karma. Because we know from the Harinam Chintamani that even if Namavas chanting gets rid of all karma, even the Parabdha karma, Aparabdha karma, Kuta and Bija. So a devotee doesn't have karma, although he may have a token reaction from his past karma that's given by Krishna. But what determines that is your level of advancement in Krishna consciousness. Whether you go to the heavenly planets and then come back as a rich person, or you go directly, take birth in a family of transcendentalists. Also depends on, yes, your desire, which is your advancement, which is the same as your advancement. Like if some devotee, all right, let's say, excuse me. Let's say, no, I want water. Let's say I'm a Sakama devotee. Okay, Sakama devotee. All right, let's say I really like to play with electronic gadgets. And the reason I like to play with electronic gadgets is because they give me some sort of mystic power without doing the yoga system. Right? Because you can communicate with other people. Anyway, so therefore you go to the heavenly planets because you're a Sakama. You get what you desire. In other words, I may be doing devotional service and have a great deal of desire to enjoy the paraphernalia that I have in devotional service. For example, my car. My car is a Tesla. So, I really like enjoying it, driving it and everything like that. So next life, I get to get a flower airplane I can fly around in or something like that. Heavenly planets, whatever type of airplanes. They have airplanes there on the heavenly planet. Or they get to fly without airplanes, sometimes too. So, based on my desire, you get what you desire, in other words. You get what you desire. So if I desire to enjoy a particular aspect of this material world in Krishna consciousness, then I get to be a demigod. Right? Generally, the demigods are what we call Sakama devotees. Sakama means they have some desire. Right? Like if you want to, let's say you're a devotee, you want to have a big house. Then you get to the heavenly planets, you get some really nice houses there. Because it's a mixed desire. And if it's really mixed, like, you're doing Satyanarayan Kata or something like that, then you really become opulent in the heavenly planets. So it really depends on your desire. And the desire is there in the subtle body. And that's what transports you, your subtle body. And if you desire Krishna, you desire to Krishna, and there's a little bit of material desire, then you'll take birth in a devotee family. Like these two souls. They had a little desire. They still desire. Of course, they may be pure devotees for all I know, but anyway, not really. But they had some little desire, so therefore they take birth in devotee families. And I had more of a desire, so I went to the heavenly planets. Got to dance a little bit.
So because of their previous, they were devotees' previous lives.
Because their desire.
And they take a birth in devotee family.
Yeah.
But they have to do their prescribed duty, right?
They don't.
They're like they have to execute devotional service or something.
I don't want to use the word have to.
Not have to.
I don't like the have to.
Okay.
We give them the opportunity, and naturally, Krishna says naturally, I should read this. First of the Gita, let's get to the Gita. Before we get into this have to business. I just hate this have to, All right, hold on a second. Let me pull my Bhagavad Gita out. 6th chapter. All right, chapter 6. Oh, actually, hold on a second. I'll go to the end of chapter 6 because I can't access the individual verses here. Hold on a second. I'll just read these verses in the English right now. Arjuna asked the question. I'll just go over the verses that I quoted in the class. Supreme Personality of Godhead said, this is 40, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or the spiritual world. One who does good, same thing I said. My friend is never overcome by evil. Next verse. The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or to a family of rich aristocracy. He's rich. Let me see what the Sanskrit is for this. Of course, Yoga Brashta, Shuchinam. Yeah, it doesn't really mean aristocracy. It's Srimatam. That means rich people. And Prabhupada explains in the purport, the unsuccessful yogis divide into two classes, exactly what I said. One has fallen after very little progress, and one has fallen after a long practice of yoga. The yogi who falls after a short period of practice goes to the higher planets, where pious living entities are allowed to enter. After a prolonged life there, and it's a really long life, it gets really boring, because demigods live longer. One is sent back again to this planet to take birth in the family of a righteous Brahmin Vaishnav or aristocratic merchants. That means rich people. And then the next verse is, or if unsuccessful after a long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly such a birth is rare in this world. On taking such a birth, he revives his divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success. Now here's the verse I was referring to. He doesn't like the children being glorified too much. By virtue, as soon as we get into the have-to business, by virtue of divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically, and also she, becomes attracted to the yogic principles even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritual. Here's the point. Stands above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. So no force. That's actually what Krishna says. Let me just go back to the Sanskrit of that verse. Hold on a second. All right, so it's Purva Abhyasena, by practice, Tena, that. Swal. Certainly Hrida is attracted surely automatically. See, Avasha, automatically. You don't have to force them. Api, Sa, Yigas. They're inquisitive about yoga, Yogasha, Sabda Brahma. So, Shabda Brahma, probably translate that, Shabda Brahma. Basically that means the Vedic rituals, Ritualistic principles of scriptures, adivartate. You understand that word, adivartate? Transcends, goes beyond, actually goes beyond. So in other words, they're automatically attracted. All we have to do with the children of the movement is facilitate their attraction. Because they'll do it automatically.
Not have to facilitate.
No, they'll do it automatically because they're automatically attracted because of their past activities, their desire. Now, of course, you have to protect them from bad association. Like, for example, Krishna had a very nice son. His name was Boma. And he had bad association. He could have been a good devotee. And he became a demon. Right? And Advaita Acharya had 6 sons, 3 of whom were not devotees. So it's not that every child of a devotee is necessarily a devotee. Like Advaita Acharya. Who's a better devotee than Advaita Acharya? And so Advaitacharya and his wife, isn't it? Sita. They had 6 children. 3 were considered non-devotees. Or, they deviated or whatever. And 3 actually were great devotees. So even there's Advaitacharya. So, but basically we have to allow the children to be attracted naturally to Krishna consciousness. Because it's from past lives. Isn't it? Nobody has to force you. Okay. So proving my point. So anyway. So any other questions or comments?
Samaraj, like if we want to make our family members or friends.
There's that make
conscious,
again.
I mean, just if you want to preach them to, it's not
There's
force.
a preach them. Then
Yeah.
if you want to give them, we should give them the opportunity.
Right. So if they don't want to turn into doing Hare Krishna conscious, like
That's their choice.
So we don't have to worry about that. Krishna knows what's.
No, we feel compassionate. They don't want to be Krishna conscious, but everyone has a choice. Everybody has a choice. Krishna consciousness has to be voluntary. Prabhupada said that leaders in the movement have to be very careful not to interfere with the voluntary devotional mood of the devotees. Everything should come from the heart. What is it? This poem? A person who is convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. You ever hear that? So you can force someone. I know families that force their children to become doctors, and the children didn't want to be doctors. And then when they graduated, they had their medical degree. They told their parents, I did this for you, but now I'm not going to be a doctor. So we have to encourage people to fulfill their own, desires and consciousness. But the main thing is the children should be protected from bad association.
So when Prabhupada says that a parent is not a parent when they don't bring their children into
We offer them Krishna consciousness. But if you force them to be, we've seen in our first generation of devotees in the movement, of children in the movement, that many of them were actually forced, and now they're rebelling. There's a lot of young people, they're not young anymore, but people in the 20s and 30s who just can't pick up a japa bag because it's so traumatic to them. But they're still attracted to Krishna. You'll see them at all the kirtans. You'll see many of the 20 and 30-year-olds, isn't it? They won't be chanting japa, but they love kirtan. So they're not still naturally attracted to Krishna consciousness. They are still attracted to Krishna consciousness. However, they're not attracted to certain activities that they were forced to do when they were young, such as chanting japa.
Maharaj, how do we deal with that trauma that was caused? Or how do we
Once we've caused the trauma, that's an interesting point. How do you deal once you cause someone to have PTSD? Send them to a therapist. No, then how do you deal with it? It's an interesting question. Well, you should be honest with them. First of all, you should be honest with them, and tell them, basically, I know I did this and it was detrimental to you, and you should choose to be Krishna conscious like that. And I think the first step is being honest like that with the children, or when they become adults, and understand, that we can't force people to be Krishna conscious. How many times I've seen so many times with people who grew up in Krishna consciousness, they were traumatized. They just can't chant japa. They look at a japa bag, they start shaking. Because it's just like, oh my God. Because you remember the things, I gave that example yesterday. I remember the things I was forced to do, and I don't want to do them anymore. I mean, things like put my, I mentioned yesterday, straighten my clothes up and, put them in a nice place so my mother can clean them. Now I just enjoy throwing them on the floor or making a bed. All these things are traumatic. I mean, my mother was like an army sergeant. She would make sure that she would force me to make my bed, and she would check to see if we had hospital. I don't know if you know what hospital corners are. You know what hospital corners are? Yeah, on the corners of the bed, you fold it, it has a little fold. It was almost like being in the army. There were inspections. Mother was like a drill sergeant, it was just inspections. So now I it's like almost like goes against my nature to do those things that I was forced to do.
So
Yeah.
Guru Maharaj, when you were saying you were forced to do those things, sometimes I force my kids to do like those things, make their beds and little chores that they don't want to do it. But I'm thinking eventually that will come to them, it will naturally come to that. It won't? Am I
You'll be
going
lucky
in
if
wrong
it.
direction?
You'll be lucky if it does, because. I mean, they may continue to do it, but basically you should want your kids to be independently thoughtful and choose to do it. So you can somehow or other try to help them understand the benefit of making their bed. You can reason with them. Reasoning is one thing. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying you don't explain to people the benefit of chanting Hare Krishna. You do. You explain to the children is the benefit, you connect with Krishna, and you show a good example yourself. And then they follow the exact. It's more likely they'll follow your example. And like I mentioned before about my own joining Krishna consciousness, the reason I'm Krishna conscious is because of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada is my role model who didn't force me to do anything, but I wanted to be like him. So if the children have role models, people they want to be like when they grow up, that's inspiring. I mean, Prabhupada was my role model. But the other devotees were trying to force me to be Krishna conscious. And that didn't work at all. I went away for 2 more years because I didn't join for 2 more years, from 1969 to 71, because I was being forced. Not forced like you have to do it, but people were telling me I was going to hell. Every time a Christian tells me I'm going to hell, I think I don't want anything to do with them, right? Unless you accept Jesus in your heart. Sometimes the Christians would come up and say, have you accepted Jesus in the heart? And I say, yes, and he told me to chant Hare Krishna. And they can't say anything about it. So, all right, any other questions? Time for prasadam, actually, we're late. Okay, thank you very much. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada.